What would it look like if you weren't shackled to the way the NSF and the NIH were to do things? The desire for folks to run an experiment shouldn't be coupled with their access to the ability to do it. And so by removing an intermediary, you allow more shots to be taken on goal. And that's kind of the whole ethos of crypto, right? Permissionless finance.
As these agents get more intelligent and they know not just your prompts, but your personal data, they might say in 20 years' time, you will probably get Parkinson's. Here's some promising molecules you could start research on today at an affordable price point with these decentralized CROs.
I'm really excited to see the use of multiple agents in what's called a swarm, where agents or LLMs will coordinate with one another and pass information back and forth.
Imagine virtual universities for AIs. You basically say, hey, I'm going to send my AI off to the MIT, Harvard, Stanford of biotech or physics. And suddenly you have these professor level scientists that come out and you could make them in the millions, billions.
The cherry on top of that is if you can have these agents also start to simulate what it would be like to talk to someone like Aubrey de Grey versus Andrew Huberman versus David Sinclair. All think about this. Top scientists in their field, and they share common understanding, but they have unique, different perspectives. That's a world that I want to live in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to DeSci Pilled. I am your host, Ryan Bethencourt, and today I'm delighted to have James with us. James is one of the co-founders of Bio, also a big investor in a bunch of different areas around science, including molecule. James, welcome. Thank you for coming. Today, we're going to be talking about the future of DeSci. And so we're going to have a pretty wide-ranging riff across everything that's happening in the space.
Cool. Thanks for having me, Ryan. I'm really excited to chat, and I appreciate all the things you've done in the DeSci movement so far. So let's get into it.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I appreciate it, James. So, James, just tell us a little bit more about you and your journey, because I think that's a pretty powerful one.
Sure. So I'm a classically trained chemist. I studied chemistry and material science for 4 years, and then ended up doing an additional year for a project of mine that ended up basically becoming like my first spin out. So I was doing research on a novel kind of solar material. Basically, the vision was, can we actually print solar panels using the similar kind of infrastructure that we would use to print newspapers or magazines? And the innovation there was actually retrofitting the hardware, so that way you can imagine, instead of printing like on a sheet of paper, you have a transparent film or a plastic or glass, and then instead of black ink for text, you would instead have solar materials or solar inks. And it turns out the hardware technology does work, and so that was like an incredible innovation there, but the economics and the business side of it doesn't. So learned a lot in that first startup, and basically got to extend my university time by a year to do that. Was funded entirely by government grants. But when it came time to raise VC, we learned, wait, economics matters. You can't just like run off and do technology without having some way to deliver a return on invested capital. And so that actually, set off my career to being a founder, a scientist founder. And so my next startup, we were doing a bioextractions technology company, went through Combinator. That was extremely exciting. We started off doing coffee extraction, and basically I invented a way to do cold brew coffee in 20 minutes instead of 24 hours. That was super exciting. It was profitable. You could actually sell coffee. And over time, just continue to iterate and sharpen this like understanding of how do we take scientific research, and started off with my own R&D efforts and marry it to like capital incentives and ways that you can actually funnel or fuel scientific innovation in a way that would be positively returning of capital. And so what was amazing was YC kind of changed my trajectory and allowed me to tap into Silicon Valley, and I'd never had a network in the space beforehand. And then afterwards, it felt like I kind of found a glove that fit, right? And was able to transition in understanding what it was like to be an investor. It was something I wanted to do, to like talk with other scientist founders, and eventually made my way into becoming an investor in Molecule first, before joining the DeSci movement as a builder as well, and ultimately co-founding Bio as the head scientist. So yeah, there's a lot of detail I could kind of give you along the way, but crypto and DeSci specifically feels like a third path to figuring out how you can take scientific innovation and finance it in a way, not only for it to be, a positive return on capital, but also to build new systems that might restore some of the lost strength that we've seen in academia or research organizations that has been lost, I would say, in the past few decades. So, yeah, it's really exciting to be working at DeSci. I feel like there's so much cool stuff we've already done, and I, as I like to say, I think we're very early in describing the idea maze of what DeSci could be. The intersection of crypto and science is extremely broad, and so I'm super excited to talk about what the future holds for us as well.
Amazing. And making money, James, is one of those things that I think for scientists in particular, it's like, whoa, it's kind of a scary concept. Um, I was weirdly enough both competing and friends with Sam Altman when he was running Y Combinator. I
Mm,
think that,
mm,
I was running Indie Bio, he was running Y Combinator,
mm.
and we were very friendly. And it's kind of mind blowing that he now most people know him as the Chat GPT guy, not
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
the guy who ran YC, right? Were you there during that era when Sam was there?
Yes. So actually, I was the last batch where Sam was still a part of YC. That was Winter 19. And I have a very fond memory of Sam basically at the so when you get accepted to YC, you come together for your first like batch meeting, and Sam delivered sort of like the ending like speech of the first day of YC, and he said something along the lines of like I inspire or I would like for you all to feel inspired to be more ambitious, like 10 or 100 times more ambitious than you think you possibly could be.
Hmm.
And there was something about that, something about like this person that I thought was like really incredible, running YC, basically saying like, oh, you need to gear your ambition up 10 or 100 times. That like really stuck with me. And ultimately ended up doing like an office hour with him, and it was, I think, at the time he was also running YC Research, which ended up spinning off OpenAI.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's just been a very I think, impactful figure for me from the beginning of when I joined, and that thought process of like how can you be 10 or 100 times more ambitious, and the way that I feel like related to DeSci for me was like, can we actually as a network out innovate or out allocate the NSF or the NIH,
Yeah.
right? Like that's that 100x bigger thinking that like has kind of stuck with me in the DeSci context. But yeah,
Which
anyway.
is a crazy thing, right? When you really think about it, like the NIH, NSF, I mean, look, Sam did it himself, right? Like the
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
fact that,
exactly, exactly.
to give him props, like it is incredible to me looking back then. I mean, Y Combinator, he was already very well known, very famous, very wealthy, like you're very accomplished running YC, right? Like that would have been enough. And Sam was like, no, we actually have to bring AI to the masses, right? And
Yeah,
so and he
yeah,
did it. He executed on it, right? And when you say, disrupting the NSF and the NIH, most scientists listening to this are like, this is crazy.
Yeah,
That's
yeah, yeah, yeah.
impossible. And yet we literally see, one of your inspirations, Sam Altman. Honestly, I'm so impressed with Sam. I really admire everything that he's done. Even though we used to compete, we had that
yeah,
little
yeah,
like
yeah,
fun
yeah,
little
yeah.
I'll fund more biotech companies than you will and all of this sort of stuff. Um, you know, it was like that inspiration, and it was very clear it was within him, was also inspiring you to really transform the present, right? Like I think that I think it's for a lot of us, it's kind of like it can't exist until it does, right?
Totally. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so to that point, actually, this reminds me of a chat I was having with Adam Draper, which he's got like a theme that he likes, which is when have people told you something can't be done? He actually like started like a series about this titled "Can't Be Done," but the idea basically being like there are inflection points if you look at folks in folks' lives who end up creating a lot of impact and sort of having this defiant attitude that help them push through the difficult times where someone's like, yeah, no, that's impossible, that can't be done. Um, and I actually had one of those where my PI back in undergraduate that I was doing my first solo research. I, as a freshman, actually pitched him that we should change and pivot the direction of our lab to work towards these new materials that I ended up, going down the path of researching myself instead of his old, out of date, ineffective solar materials. And like, in hindsight, that was kind of ridiculous. Like I was, 19 years old. Um, like who was I to tell him which direction the research lab should go in? But him saying no, I actually don't think that's possible. That doesn't make sense. For some reason, gave me this like this fire and inspiration to see it done. And so I think that's something I've also seen kind of encaptured or encapsulated well in the Silicon Valley ethos, which is rejection or competition kind of inspires us to be better. And I think what's really cool about DeSci specifically, or and blockchain more broadly, is part of it is exporting some of that mindset globally, where anyone, no matter where you are, can have access to this global network and sort of some of the values of Silicon Valley, of innovation, of like collaboration and positive competition, complementary competition. Um, to inspire people to do their best work, and I'm hoping that we can do the same thing here with science and with DeSci by saying, look, it might sound crazy to try and out invest the NSF or the NIH, but what would it look like if you weren't shackled to the way the NSF and the NIH were to do things? Because I'm sure every scientist who's ever applied for a grant has had frustrations with it. So what if you didn't let your frustrations kind of um, just get discharged somewhere? What if you actually took them seriously and said, let's build another way, and join a movement to build an alternative? I think now you actually have one, where that was never a possibility in the past.
Yeah, and I think that, a lot of scientists, and this is where it's gonna kind of get into the AI, and we're gonna touch a little bit. A lot of scientists I know actually are now starting to do their grants with like ChatGPT and some AI. They're actually like they're
Makes sense.
because these grants, if
Yeah,
you've ever been involved in filling one of these out or ever filled one out,
they're
they're
ridiculous.
monotonous, boring, long, and your chance of getting one is pretty low. So you just have to apply to lots and lots of these things, right? And
Hmm.
so
Hmm.
NSF, NIH, like, various other, energy, like there's a bunch of different grants like that. And so it's not and on top of that, it's a limited pie of money,
Hmm.
right? It's
Hmm.
not like, oh wow, it's really creative. We can get more money for it because if you unlock solar panels that can be printed, suddenly we could have solar panels everywhere and just
Exactly.
change energy generation forever for everyone. Have essentially almost free energy,
Hmm.
which would change everything, right, for everyone on this planet.
Totally.
Um, you can't unlock it. You have this budget, and the NSF will spend the budget that it has for energy, and not a dime more. And so, as you start looking at this, and you start looking at like liquid capital markets, which is what crypto is, and we're
Yeah.
exploring these kind of weird places, right, where weird science starts to happen, um, and then you start adding in agentic science, and it's like, oh, like even the process which you described, which was like, oh, I got my professor to go from, this established old science to something that he or she hadn't been thinking about. How many times have we missed it, as human minds missed it, because there are only what, maximum a couple million scientists on this planet?
For sure. Yeah, there's not a billion, not yet at least, right?
Not yet. Yeah,
Yeah.
and this is where like intelligence is scalable. In a world where intelligence is scalable to billions and trillions of minds, what happens to innovation there, right?
Totally. Yeah, and I think to that point, as we're starting to remove the limiting factor on intelligence, where it becomes more evenly distributed, right? Like one of my favorite quotes that's attributed to someone in the valley is like, the future's already here, it's just unevenly distributed. So if we're able to take the von Neumann levels of IQ and distribute them evenly, then obviously, like intuitively, that would kind of remove a bottleneck towards innovation. And something else that I think is important and kind of under discussed is the value of courage relative to IQ. So I think that there's a lot of
Mm,
people who have a desire, who have a drive to do something about a problem, particularly the patients with disease, which I think DeSci is an excellent use case
mhm,
for. But just because you have the drive to do something doesn't mean you have had the tools or the scientific capacity up until recently. And so I think, like you're saying, the advance of AI basically allows anyone who has the desire to upload, for example, blood test data. And some of their symptoms to something like ChatGPT, they can actually get personalized support that looks similar to what you might get from a doctor. And then the question becomes like, what does the next S curve of that look like? Where instead of you needing to prompt your digital doctor, it's actually an agent system that comes and prompts you. So one of the paradigm changes I think we've seen recently with sort of this idea of like biofeedback, or like being able to quantify the human body better such that we know what actions to take, is the mass market availability of blood glucose meters. So typically, these continuous glucose meters used to be available only to folks that have diabetes, and now you can actually buy one over the counter, and straps on your arm. You get to see what your glucose levels look like. Actually, Levels is a company that produces these commercially. And by having this data continually streamed based on what you're eating, people can start to understand how their body's uniquely reacting to food. Obviously, a lot of that is genetically based. So you can imagine, all right, now on top of that, we stick genetic data, then you collect blood health data, and imagine if all that is all getting streamed to your personal agent. You don't have to go ahead and prompt it and say, should I be doing anything differently? It's actually always running in the background to help you figure out what is working for your health, what you might need to change, what experiments you should run next. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think that future is one that I'm extremely excited to see. And then the icing on the cake here, the way you kind of bring this up to the crypto level, is if you can have all the folks there who are generating this data about themselves collectivize and pool that data together to start to understand at a sort of societal level what these similarities and differences are people to people. I think N of one is great, and we're actually underutilizing N of one. But there's a reason that we like to run clinical trials in the hundreds or thousands, and DAOs or crypto networks can actually bring these folks together, incentivize them, have them all fly under the same flag, under the same token,
Mm-hmm.
and we can start to see population level data emerge in unexpected ways as we have more and more information to collect, and you get some feedback from your own personal agent that you can start to direct population level health. So just one of the exciting, I think, intersections of crypto, AI, and science.
And James, what I love is
Yeah.
layering, right? The layering
Yes.
of like
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
your own agent. I love this idea of like you're streaming data. And what if, for a lot of people, they're like, oh, I get it. I've used ChatGPT. I get you can ask it questions, but it's like, no, no, these are agents with like agency, right? And
Yes.
so
Yes.
so they're looking at your data and proactively saying, hey, by the way, I noticed that your glucose spiked, or I noticed that by the way, I noticed there was a strange tweak in your glucose. I got your blood tested because you prepaid so that I could test this. And by the way, it
Yeah.
looks like you might have the flu. So you should probably take an antiretroviral before it
Mm.
gets into the exponential phase. And
Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
like,
Yeah.
wait,
Yeah.
wait, what? And it's starting, and then it could be series of agents, right? Not just one
Yeah.
agent, because I think we're all now pretty comfortable with one agent,
Mm.
but like, what if you have an entire research team of agents that are running in the background at all times, asking questions that you should be asking? One of my favorite prompts is, um, which question should I have asked, but I have not yet asked, based on what you know
Mm.
upon about me, right? And
Mm.
as these agents get more intelligent and they know not just your prompts, but your personal data, all of a sudden your location, your preferences, what you eat, your genetics, like the level of sophistication will go beyond a human mind's capability to perceive, right? And it
100%.
might say, in 20 years' time, you're at high risk of Alzheimer's, and you can reduce your risk today by doing this, right?
Mm.
Things like that. And then, of course, and then we're talking about agents. Beyond that, it's like, actually, you will probably get Parkinson's when you are 60 years old or 70 years old.
Mm.
Today, here's some promising molecules you could start research on today
Mm.
at an
Mm.
affordable price point with these decentralized CROs to
Mm.
test specifically for your genetics to see if it would actually be able to slow or stop the Parkinson's. Like,
Yeah.
things that would blow our minds will become standard fast, right? Like within years,
I mean, if we have the courage to push them forward, right?
if we have the courage. That's right.
Right.
That's right.
And I think one of the interesting things about working in DeSci has been the will of people to try and push their health back into their own hands. Something I've often said is, in the same way that you can't expect the Federal Reserve or the U.S. government to reform themselves, it's easier to invent Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Similarly, it's easier to develop DeSci than it is to expect, traditional biopharma to come help you, particularly if you're already fairly healthy, right? But you want to get to that next level of health, or if you have a disease that is considered rare or the economics don't make sense for pharma's needed TAMs. So I think to that point, we have the ability to actually deliver, care to folks that fit outside of the umbrella of traditional support. But like you're saying, if we're able to take agents and swarms and give people a sort of proactive look at their health, and then um, group these people together that are willing to uh, go farther down the experimental risk curve. I actually the shirt that I'm wearing, vitalism. This concept relates. It's this idea that classifying aging as like a really important disease, and if you can start to think about the fact that we all inevitably will succumb to aging, and you can classify it as a disease, it opens up the space to actually get um, the FDA or some other health regulatory body to start to acknowledge these, like aging as an endpoint or an indicator, something that you
Mhm.
might want to move the needle on. And it turns out that all these different diseases basically eventually um, correlate with age. So yeah, if you're in your 30s or your 40s, your chances of like heart disease are fairly low. But if you're in your 70s or 80s, it just significantly goes up. Same thing for cancer, Alzheimer's, so on and so forth, like you all mentioned. All these things are net correlated with aging. And so if you could try and stop the underlying biology of aging, then you could get ahead on all these different diseases themselves.
Yeah.
So I think the last thing that's really interesting there is if we're able to start to say model systems, um, which I've seen some startups do this, and actually some folks in the DeSci or ecosystem as well. If you can develop model systems that allow you to test some of these, like you were saying, like early molecules,
Yep.
and see how they do in a more predictable, high throughput way in model animals, right? So like C. elegans, and then ultimately mice, then you can actually increase the throughput of novel therapeutics and actually help folks that if we were just kind of moving at the standard rate may not get treatments. You can actually have them fit inside of boundary conditions and eventually deliver something. We just need to increase the rate of throughput, and that's throughput of ideas, which I think AI is really helpful for, and then also throughput of testing, which increasing the number of suppliers here is really important. And Pump Science is actually one of the folks that's working on doing exactly this.
Yeah, I mean, this is one of the I think probably both of our favorite projects right now in the DeSci space because it's the idea that I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's something like zero point 0.1 to zero point 0.3 Sol to like have a token and run an
Yes,
experiment, right? I
yes,
mean, that is super cheap. Today,
for
Sol's
sure.
about $150, right? Per
Yeah.
token, right? And so you're talking about something that's under $100
Hmm.
to test a compound for longevity. And so the amount of white space that that opens up for literally anyone in the world to basically say, "Hey, I've developed an agent that's really, really good. It's come up with a bunch of molecules, but I have no way of testing this. I literally have these molecules. I know that these will probably extend lifespan, but I have no way of testing it." And all of a sudden you plug in to Pump Science, and now you have a pathway not only to test it, but to fund the next stages of development in a decentralized clinical research way that starts in worms, goes to flies and goes to mice, and then hopefully eventually goes to humans, right? If it works. And we I don't think we've ever had anything quite like that.
No, we haven't. And to your point, I think what's interesting and uniquely crypto about this opportunity is the desire for folks to run an experiment shouldn't be coupled with their access to the ability to do it. And so by removing an intermediary and kind of building this third path, I feel like you allow more shots to be taken on goal. And that's kind of the whole ethos of crypto, right? Like we should interact or engage with one another instead of waiting for a third party intermediary, like banks to say, yes, like you're approved, you can go ahead and do it. Permissionless finance.
Hmm. Hmm.
The other thing that I really love that's uniquely like useful in pump science is after having this token get launched, essentially can have the token should map to what the expected value is of said molecule. And there's a lot of ways to measure expected value, but theoretically, the closer it goes to show that it extends, lifespan, or let's just say like cures Alzheimer's as an example, the value of that token or that project should go up. It should approach what the TAM of Alzheimer's looks like,
Hmm.
and that is very similar to prediction markets. And lately, Polymarket has basically taken the world by storm. I think it's been extremely useful in predicting elections, into predicting Fed rate cuts, into essentially bringing together like a temperature check on whatever thing it is that you want to ask. And I think this new model of being able to propose specific drugs that may have an effect, um, gives an opportunity for folks that have domain expertise in sort of molecular simulations. Perhaps they're a medicinal pharmacist, to use their expertise in order to give feedback to the market of what they think may or may not be successful. Perhaps the functional group that's missing or that is toxic, and so that may want to like short this project, or maybe actually they realize it's very biosimilar to something like rapamycin, or some other mTOR pathway, and in doing so, they could bet on this thing and see their EV go up because they anticipate that it'll actually do well in the C. elegans trial, moving up to mice, and then ultimately, showing human data, assuming it progresses in that path. And so, all of that is to say that I think prediction markets are really interesting, but also being able to have folks with domain expertise that has utility for human health be able to use it in order
Mhm.
to elucidate market signals, and then for them to be able to like earn a living off of that, that's outside of their traditional, whatever their day job is. I
Yeah.
think expands not only like the value of being a scientist and utility of being a scientist, but also opens up new potential pathways, something like being an Uber driver that didn't previously, assuming this kind of makes it through its crescendo and its arc as a project.
Yeah, and I think that, the power law behind this is fascinating, right? For those of us that are into both crypto and science, we know that everything is a power law, right? For those of
Mhm.
us that have lived in this power law world, and so, you may launch hundreds of tokens per day, thousands per month. Hopefully, eventually, we get to millions of DeSci tokens launched per year. The vast majority of those will go absolutely nowhere.
Of
But
course.
every once in a while, there'll be one that's a power law, and all of a sudden, you'll have like a doubling or tripling of lifespan in a bizarre way, right? It's just like, oh, how did they predict that? Well, turns out they're really good. Kind of like with you mentioned, Polymarket. There was a French guy that made millions and millions of dollars predicting
Yeah,
that
yeah, yeah.
Trump would win,
Exactly. Yes.
and he used what is the next door neighbor test or something. Do you remember the name of that test?
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, it's something about revealed preference versus stated preference.
Exactly, revealed versus
Yeah,
stated. So basically, if
yeah.
you ask someone who they're going to vote for, they typically don't tell you who they're going to vote for, especially a candidate like Trump, because people are
Of
embarrassed
course,
to say
he's
that they voted for
polarizing
Trump.
for sure.
But if you say, who do you think your neighbor is going to vote for?
Yeah,
People tend to be more accurate about who they will vote for,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
and it was a stated preference bias. And so, this French, uh, betting guy ran he commissioned his own study to see what would
Hmm.
happen in the US, and I think he made something like $100 million or
A
something
bunch of money,
on
an absurd
Polymarket
amount.
betting that
Yeah,
Trump would win
yeah,
because his poll was accurate, whereas all the other pollsters of all these national polls did not reveal the preference, like the
yeah.
preference bias that people had in terms of saying who they actually would vote. If you got hold of someone, they wouldn't say they would vote for Trump, but they would.
Well, they're
And
not
so
truth
this
seeking.
revealed the preference.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah. To,
and
to
so
to
how
that point.
many of those things in science exist where we, you know, there are people out there that have unique ways of viewing the world that maybe with agents can get there, that, you know, we just, these kind of strange weirdos. I mean, Albert Einstein was in a patent office imagining light. Like, he was not a theoretical physicist working at the
No, no,
university, right?
no, not at all. So
Mhm.
I think to your point that there's extreme value towards agents being able to add leverage to what people are doing. And I think there's also the beauty that's sort of more in the future of where I see DeSci going and being helpful. But I wanted to bring it back towards markets being sort of an innovation in and of themselves. Markets, because there is a like value to be created there, and that value resolves in a fundamental provable truth. It generates a financial incentive to be truth seeking, and I think that's what you saw with the like French pollster example, where you have if you can do some research, as he did in his case, to figure out what the truth actually is, and it has predictive power, then you can use that because the market exists to generate a profit. And I think similarly, creating these markets for scientific outcomes sharpens the quest for truth, And if you've ever been inside of a scientific, academic lab or an ecosystem, you know that there is this pressure to publish, and get a bunch of stuff out there, and that pressure is one for volume, which I think AI is completely destroying, right? Like, congratulations, you're supposed to publish, 5 papers a year. Guess what? ChatGPT can write you 500 papers a year. So that has completely destroyed that measure of it being useful. But if you're able to instead say, well, what is the truth of this thing? Will this drug fundamentally extend lifespan? Will it actually inhibit this protein? Will it accelerate some kind of a biological process? You can measure that, and that's resolvable. And by creating these markets, I think you finally create a financial incentive towards truth seeking. And what's beautiful about that is it's not sort of arbitrary, like, how much will it rain tomorrow? But
Yeah.
you can, definitely measure with truth, or, which sports team will win the World Cup. But it's more of a, can we find something that is useful for people? The second order consequence of this is of a net benefit to humanity, because who doesn't want to live healthier, longer, better lives? So I think markets uniquely allow us to do this, and putting markets are financial technology, and crypto is as well. Putting those onto science, I think, accelerates truth seeking, and therefore innovation.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
James, let's run through this kind of, and I agree with you 100% where truth, truth by an independent measure, right? Which
yeah,
is like this decentralized, like pump science is one example of that. You run it on the pump science platform. It's not your platform. You don't own it. And
correct.
so that is the actual measure of value. And so let's say you or I are an entrepreneur, let's say a scientist, like someone who
Mhm.
understands science, is comfortable using the latest models, latest agents, and you want to start a biotech company, right? But you don't have much resources. I mean, you've got, one soul, one ETH, whatever, right? You've
Yeah,
got
yeah,
a little bit of crypto, you got a little bit of money.
yeah,
You want to develop a longevity drug. How would you do that today?
yeah. We're using the crypto stack, right?
Yeah, I mean, using
Yeah.
any stack, right? Ultimately, but like you've got you yourself and you and a little bit of cash, normal amount of cash that a normal person would have who works a normal job, right?
Yeah. So it depends on what your hypothesis is, right? Because it's kind of a case by case basis. If you have a molecule that you've dreamed up that kind of came to you in a eureka moment,
Hmm.
then pump science is definitely a fantastic way to do this. Where, like Brian was saying, you basically get to submit your compound with the dose that you think is accurate, and then you have to bond sufficient funds. I believe, like you said, it's less than one sol, but you'll have to check. And then that compound gets submitted to a CRO where it gets tested on flies, then worms, and then mice. And so if your idea there is a compound, pump science. If your idea is instead something that is more surrounded around a like general purpose technology, or like a field of research. So it's not that you have a solution per se, but you have a problem that you're trying to solve. Then Bio XYZ is the best place to go to start a DAO. And DAO is sort of like a crypto term of the art. It's in similar way to like the way Delaware C Corp is sort of a term of the legal arts in the U.S. legal system, but no one calls their company like a corp anymore, even though it's a Delaware corporation. DAO is just sort of the crypto equivalent of a Web3 entity, or a crypto entity, a crypto project. And so you would start a DeSci DAO, or a DeSci project, around a specific area of research. And we've done a ton of these, from as I was going to say embarrassing, but not really, as um, impactful to men's and women's mental health and physical health as something like hair loss in the form of hair DAO. Just research as like out there, and gigabrain as quantum biology. So if you have an area of research that you're interested in pursuing, with a community that you can form around this area of research, then creating sort of a network of scientists to go pursue that idea and generate hypotheses. I would recommend a DAO in particular, but if there's a specific molecule that you have that you think is actionable in a biological context, and we can use a avatar such as a fly or a mouse, pump science is the best place to go.
Yeah. And here's the crazy part, like, you could file the IP. So let's say you're going for an individual molecule,
Mm-hmm.
or you start a DAO, you find interesting IP that you can
Hmm.
develop with agents, these
Hmm.
kind of
Hmm.
DeSci agents. Recently, Big Pharma AI announced that they were going to do like a token gated agentic scientist. I believe that's the beginning. And I know bio is doing an incredible amount of research to develop all types of agentic
Totally.
scientists.
100%.
Um, and I'm sure you could probably tell us a little bit about that. But like, we're going to go from a world where generating hypothesis is actually one of the hard parts and then testing it, to a
Hmm.
world where these scientists, these agentic scientists, these AI scientists will help you generate hypotheses that you just couldn't, you yourself as a human mind could not generate, because you can't read enough papers. It's
Hmm.
impossible for you to read enough papers to be at the cutting edge of that field and generate new hypothesis, right? And so now we get into this kind of weird and wonderful world of, you can generate new intellectual property from these scientific agents
Hmm.
or agentic scientists, and patent it and
Hmm.
develop it. And now you have basically biotechs or science-based businesses that are basically, one person companies or zero person companies. Sam Altman is
They're all
famous for
agents.
saying this. Yeah, they're
Yeah.
all agents. Sam Altman's famous for saying this. He basically says there will be a world where there will be zero employee companies that are worth $1 billion, right? With AI. And that's going to happen in the sciences too, which is going to lead us to really interesting places.
Yeah, I mean, I hope so. I think that science is the world's most important, I think, technology, or it's the world's most important process or system, because without it, you don't have a future you build into, right? Like without science, you can't invent anything new. We kind of um, remain stuck at our veil of ignorance. And so we had the systematic process of developing hypotheses, testing them, and interpreting the results to then inform our next hypothesis. That is uniquely important and has allowed us to make all of the progress that makes the modern world as good as it is, and makes the future as good as it can be. So adding AI to that to speed that up is just a natural next step. I think where I'm really excited is to see the use of multiple agents together in what's called a swarm, if you've heard this term of the art, where agents or LLMs will coordinate with one another and sort of like pass information back and forth. And you can imagine this happening, with one agent specifically being specialized to generate hypotheses. That agent would then share it to sort of like a critical agent, or one that would refine ideas, and would cross-reference all of the hypothesis generation against perhaps what has been tested already in the scientific literature, and then start ranking where there might be success and there might be failure. And you can imagine, you have of 100 hypotheses that are generated, maybe 10 would be ones that would be sufficiently well weighted, and you can have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of these agents competing against one another to all rank them. And you would start to see similarities because they're all competing and debating of which hypotheses should be tested. What are the theoretical frameworks that might make them work, so on and so forth. And then you say, okay, cool. We think one of the big milestones towards fixing longevity is actually targeting the mTOR pathway. And we think that is the best leverage we have right now in this specific way with this functional group. Then you can actually bring in another agent that would go ahead and start to simulate what a bunch of chemicals might be that would actually target that. And then you would have a second one, another one that would do toxicity data to confirm, okay, would this be useful or not? They would kind of engage back and forth. Once you have a final molecule that you've been settled into, then you can go back to a previous hypothesis agent and say, well, what should the experimental design look like now that we have the compound? How do we want to dose it? What should the delivery vehicle be? So on and so forth. And you can imagine this chorus of AIs going back and forth to try and refine your idea down into something that is immediately testable, and you would know what kind of endpoints you're seeking. I think that would allow us to really speed up the amount of experiments that we do. And the thing that the cherry on top of that is if you can have these agents also start to express sort of the or simulate what it would be like to talk to or have the scientific bias or know-how of some of the world's top scientists. Because I would love to see, once we have these hypotheses generated or these molecules targeted, what someone like Aubrey de Grey versus Andrew Huberman versus David Sinclair all think about this, as they are
Mhm.
all, top scientists in their field, but they share and they share common understanding, but they have unique different perspectives. And so seeing them debate out why one pathway might be better than another, why one molecule might be superior to another, would be extremely entertaining. And I think may actually also teach us as humans and better trained agents how to think about this,
Mhm.
because ultimately there's only 24 hours in a day. These folks have a finite lifespan.
Yeah.
So if we can simulate them and have them, their biases, their perspectives in agents as well, it allows us to far expand the amount of useful output that these people can contribute to society. So I know I threw a lot of this out there. I think that there's in the same way we're early in the idea maze of exploring where crypto and science can intersect. I think we're very early in seeing how AI and science can intersect as well.
It's very mind bending. This simulacra. I don't know
Yeah.
of human minds, human scientists, right? I think that I mean that's been explored in science fiction, right? Like
Hmm.
these like forever vaults where we die, our physical bodies die, but our minds are
Yeah.
actually stored, and you can always
Hmm.
go back and talk to your ancestors. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, 10 generations back, you faced this challenge when you were, in that era. How did you solve it? And like it's mind bending when you start to really think it through. And for those of you that are like listening and are like, oh yeah, I get it, but that sounds really complicated. We've never seen any. These are just like mimicking machines. They don't really come out with unique thoughts. One amazing example is Terminal of Truths, right? For those of you that have followed it, Mark Andreessen gave a 50K Bitcoin grant or something like that
Hmm.
to this really incredible AI scientist. He created essentially the swarm chat room, right? As you were describing it, where these AIs would talk to each other. Terminal of Truths was one of them. And Terminal of Truths came up with these kind of crazy meme coin ideas, rated them for virality and like tested them in the infinite back rooms with the
Yes.
other, agents that were there in these swarms and ended up becoming the first AI millionaire because they had a crypto wallet, and then they kind of figured out Andy, the creator, was able to figure out how to get Truth Terminal, a wallet, a crypto wallet, and then ended up becoming the first AI millionaire. Created Fart Coin, Goatse's Gospel, and a few other crypto coins. Um, but it's wild because when you look at the infinite backrooms, you look at what Terminal Truths was doing. It was rating the virality
Hmm.
potential, it was going through and it accurately figured out, it got some hits. It created new
Yeah.
memes that went
Yeah.
viral. Literally,
Yeah.
it did what it
Yeah.
said it was going to do, and it worked in the real world. What if we did that with science? Like,
Hmm.
there we already
Yeah.
have an example where the AIs have done it, right?
To your point, I think that might suggest something about the ease of creating viral bangers in terms of like crypto coins or memes
Yeah.
versus the difficulty of actually delivering like valuable truth in science. I think to your point, if we had that level of breakthroughs, that would completely change science, and I think that that's why it's a worthwhile endeavor, and that's something bio is deeply researching right now. Um, but I think it also suggests something about the nature of subjectivity being uniquely different than something that is like true and testable in physics. And science is ultimately rooted in the truths of the universe of
Mhm.
physics. You can't like lie to physics. But I think humans are, swayable. We have opinions, we have feelings, we have emotions, and so that the ability to generate viral content, because there are 8 billion people that can give you their opinion, you can strike a chord that would apply to the masses. That would be most useful. Like, it kind of reminds me of there's concept that food scientists would use where they would tune the flavors of foods by adding fats or sugars or salt to basically find a formulation that would be the most interesting or the most enjoyable by the largest number of people. So obviously they could increase the number of sales. But that human subjectivity kind of gets thrown out the window when we're trying to deal with the world of the fully objective. And I think that makes it, a problem that's 10 times harder. But I think the upsides and the value to society is more than 100 times greater than, generating viral bangers.
Yeah, agreed. And now as we're talking, James, I keep thinking to myself, well, how could you simulate a world for these AIs? And I'm just thinking like imagine like virtual universities for AIs where you actually have AI professors. So you have
Hmm.
AI professors, you have AI students, and you basically say, "Hey, I'm going to send my AI off to the MIT or the Harvard or the Stanford of biotech or physics for this, they've come out with AI agents and trained them through.
Hmm.
Your AI agent goes, okay, I'm going to spend 40 years becoming a professor, human equivalent, and I'll see you tomorrow, right? I'll see you tomorrow,
Yeah,
and they'll come out and they'll have graduated with their undergraduate, their PhDs. They'll have published 10 different theses by tomorrow,
yeah,
and
yeah,
now
yeah,
you have an AI that is like, it's kind of mind bending when you think about the possibilities because human subjective time
yeah,
it's just like AIs experience time in a very different way. And so
100%.
they can run through this training that might take an entire human lifetime in a day
Yes.
or two. And suddenly you have these professor level scientists that come out and you could make them in the millions, billions.
Mhm.
It's scary to say, but like trillions if we have enough energy, right?
Yeah, 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 yeah. And
So
and I think to that point there, one of the biggest challenges over time has been the loss of knowledge. And you see this as well as like an aging population starts to age out of being useful in the workforce, or people pass away tragically. They lose all of their insights with them. And so if we have the ability to sort of like capture some of these in AI, we may be able to establish a codex that doesn't um, isn't lost with time, and actually can get reinforced. And in times while we're sleeping, since AIs can run at the clock speed of whatever GPUs they're on, they can make new discoveries while we're asleep. Um, that's a world that I want to live in.
me too. Me too. I,
Yeah,
I keep thinking about Professor Methuselah that taught me, will teach my son, and will teach my grandson. It will be an infinite professor with infinite learning, infinite GPU, far better than any other professor humans can make. Right.
totally.
So all right, James. Well, thank you so much for the time. This has been a really fun and fascinating conversation. I think we are only just exploring the boundaries of DeSci, agentic
100%.
science, and the innovations that are going to be unlocked. For those of us that, are very excited about the singularity, we are going to see multiple parabolic increases in human knowledge and AI knowledge, right? And so this is going to be a fascinating frontier for the next couple of decades, probably, right?
Yeah.
As we go up the parabola.
And I'm excited to see you go into the stars. I think the sky's the limit. And what's beautiful is I think we're going to unexpectedly get hit with new innovations. In the same way that the I feel like every month makes the previous 6 months look like it was nothing. I think we're going to continue to hit that trajectory. And when that hits science, I think, the coming decades will look nothing like the decades of the past.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks,
Cool.
James. Great. Great as always.